Hey, what's up? It's Kev here, and cool episode today with my friend David Deutsch. These audios are taken from a series of short 7-minute-ish videos that David Deutsch and I shot recently in Phoenix together as we were there as a mastermind group with my friend John Carlton. You're really going to dig these. David, as you know, is a legend in the copywriting world. He's been at it 30 plus years. He worked with Ogilvy and Mather. Literally, shared air with the great David Ogilvy back in the day. And he is still one of the brightest, most plugged in and influential copywriters you could hire to consult and possibly write some of your copy. So davidldeutsch.com is where you find David. And I wanted to give you some context for these because these are strung together from 3 different separate interviews. And that's why the conversation might feel a little bit disjointed. But it's all good stuff, and I know you're going to dig learning from David. He is one of the masters. So dig it, enjoy it, let us know how you felt about it, and if you like learning from the best working copywriters in the biz, then you belong behind the great gates with us in the private area of Copy Chief. Go to copychief.com/join and discover how you can get inside. And I'll look for you there. Enjoy the episode. Hi, welcome back to Big Time Copywriters in Socks, Drinking Tea. I'm Kevin Rogers, here with David Deutsch. How are you, David?
I'm great, Kevin. How you doing?
Good, buddy. Thanks for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
You look good.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, man. I feel good. So you're consulting mostly these days. Are you writing copy still actively at all? Can somebody hire the great David Deutsch to write a sales letter for them these days?
Yeah, they still can.
Really?
I don't do as much as I used to. A lot of what I do now is kind of mentoring.
Yeah.
Mentoring writers or clients through projects.
Yeah.
So I'll kind of supervise what they write. We'll brainstorm together. I'll look at the copy. We'll fix it up together.
Yeah, that's the most valuable thing, I think, right?
I think so. I'd rather work on 10 things and do that than one thing and it's, all mine.
And how many people are there at your level who even offer that?
Right.
30 years?
Yeah, at least.
And started at Ogilvy.
Started at Ogilvy and Mather on Madison Avenue. Yeah.
I say Mather. You're going to go with Mather?
I am going to correct that, yes. On
Madison, what was that like? Ogilvy was there at the time?
Ogilvy was still there. He was kind of commuting from France every now and, back and forth. It was like working in a teaching hospital. The Ogilvy kind of taught. There were rules. There were ways of doing things. Junior copywriters were developed, through a kind of a program, just like doctors got a chance to operate on patients. We got a chance to write copy, and the David Ogilvy or people under David would, review it. Wow. You just learn so much. So they
inspired you to just try.
Exactly.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Unlike surgery, I hope.
Unlike surgery, yes.
Well, there's a protocol.
There are, yes. And the consequences aren't as great when you mess up.
I don't know. Depends how big the client is.
One of the great things about Ogilvy, too, was he had a real love of direct response.
Yeah.
He said direct mail was his first love.
Yeah.
He talked about how when he was in England, he sent out postcards for a hotel and the hotel got fully booked, and he always loved direct response.
Seeing the immediate result of his words in action.
Yeah. And even regular advertising, he always felt, should be much more salesmanship than it was.
Right. You think that's gone today? Like we're taping this not long after the Super Bowl, and we see all the Super Bowl ads and things. Is it still as big a gap as there ever was between direct response and, Madison Avenue type advertising? Yeah,
I think still in a lot of ways, although, of course, now there's a lot of stuff on television that is direct response.
Yeah.
But it's not, it's not what the major advertisers do.
Right. Do you ever think that we could use a little bit more of that kind of creativity and maybe cleverness in direct response, or is that just too dangerous?
No, I don't. Well, it's dangerous, I think, if you don't know what you're doing with it. But I think a lot of people use humor Jim Rutz used to be very effective at being funny, witty, clever, Yeah. And I think some people, do that naturally. And, people want to read what's entertaining.
Entertaining. Yeah, that's a key word there. I think of like Carlton's ads were always entertaining, no matter what it was about, right? And do you have a gauge for that? If you're writing or if you're judging copy, boring's one thing, but you go, it's okay, but it could be more entertaining. Have a stronger voice. Like what are the factors if we're looking at entertainment
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, it's entertainment. It's interesting. You know, like what keeps people reading, right? And what keeps people watching television shows or whatever, right? We get involved with characters.
Right.
We get involved with story.
Yeah.
They use suspense. They
Tension.
use surprise.
Yeah.
They use curiosity.
Yeah. Well, I would say that, I'm mentoring a 13-year-old kid who wants to do stand-up and doing his first set ever. I told him, I said, the reason a joke works is because of tension, right? There needs to be peril. Something has to be at stake. And we have to be rooting for the character, just like in any other story.
Right.
We have to set up some kind of a tense scenario and then release it. And that's why we laugh at the relief. And then there's psychological layers upon that too. But it's the same for any ad. And as we focus on like shorter copy, Facebook ads or YouTube videos and things like that, I feel like that idea of entertainment of I need to create tension here is missing. It tends to be a little bit more straight up punch without any context.
Right. And, the nice thing about comedy is, of course, you hear the laugh if it works, and then you know whether it does or not. And copywriting doesn't go for the laugh like that.
Right.
But you're right. You still need to have that same tension. I wonder what will happen. I wonder what the solution is that's going to be offered to me. This story that I'm being told about the doctor trying to discover this new way to lose weight. Like, I wonder if he's going to be able to discover it, how he'll discover it.
But it also has to be super personal to them too. It's what's in it for me.
Right.
And that is kind of the nuance of great copy, right? It has that entertainment factor. It has that urgency, but it has to be so personal. Otherwise, you don't want to just read about it. You got to be rooting to believe in the result so that you believe that it might work for you.
Right. And that's a huge thing, as you know, is will it work? Like, okay, it's one thing to convince people it does work, but it's another thing to convince people that it will work for me.
Right.
Will work for them specifically.
This is why we'll never get bored.
Right.
Doing this. And I love something, I always quote you on this. You said it just off the cuff once, but it was like, we were talking about, is copywriting a joyous endeavor, right? And you said, look, nobody's whistling while they at the keyboard. You know what I mean? It's hard work, right? But it is that relentless pursuit. What do you think drives really good copywriters to keep at it? Even sometimes you're just getting your ass kicked,
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, well, first of all, there's the negative part, right? Some people can keep at it because they're not so discouraged each time something happens. They just sort of look at it as, oh, great, another learning experience. Yeah. Great. I've got to fail 20 times before I succeed. Let me keep failing as many times as I can and I'll succeed. That kind of little mental things. But I mean, some people love to string words together, like Richard Armstrong and I think Clayton and Bob Bly. They love the act of writing.
Yeah.
I think some people like the act of kind of selling people, like I'm going to figure out how to convince these people to buy this thing. It's an interesting I'm probably more like that. I'm probably a little more like, this is a puzzle and I want to figure it out. That's why I like bullets. It's like one little puzzle after the other, right? How do I take this bit of boring information and tease it in a way that's interesting?
Yeah.
And then I solve that puzzle and say, okay, now the next little puzzle.
Yeah. Yeah. You're known for those great fascinations.
Yeah. Because I love doing them.
Yeah. And the magalogs. Did you write the first magalog or among the first magalogs?
No, I didn't write the first one. I think that was probably Jim Rutz.
Yeah. But you excelled at those. You think that's because you're so good at bullets?
I think it's because I'm really good at bullets, yeah. Because even the parts of a magalog that aren't bullets per se, sometimes they're kind of have a bullet-like fascination to them. Yeah.
I love that you brought that up because one of the trainings in Copy Chief is a bullet masterclass. And what's interesting about it is that it's not just about how to write bullets. It's about how to think in bullets throughout different parts of the copy. For instance, doing a thing, and my first stage of research was always I would bullet the product. So if it's 4 video modules, I'd go through them all and just write bullets as I went, right? And most of them weren't usable, but that'd be how I note what's in the product. And then I would do a thing called bullet check the copy, meaning you shouldn't be able to get more than 4 tops, maybe 2 paragraphs of copy down without being able to pull a bullet out of that.
It's an interesting way to do it. Yeah.
And I like that you said that. It's like in a magalog especially, it might be 5, 8 pages long, but every single word, sentence, phrase needs to be moving the story forward and something repeatable. Right. I mean, it's almost like we're training our reader to be able to pitch this for us. Mm-hmm. They have to be so enthralled with it that I think a mark of maybe a successful piece, like who knows how we'd ever test this, is like, did it come up at dinner? Right. But a mark of a successful piece too is, like you started to say, can someone pitch it? Like if someone reads your copy, you say, okay, sell this back to me. Would you? I don't know, something about, it's a good thing because you might make some money or something. But if they say, oh, you should buy this because X, Y, and Z, and it's, they have a very clear chain of logic from having read it, it's clear and powerful. You're right. Yeah. And depending on the price of the thing you're selling, you very well may need them to go pitch it for you before they can make the purchase. Yeah, so. To their spouse, to their whoever they need to exactly. And justify it in their own minds, too. Sure, 100%, yeah. The thing about people are most afraid of looking stupid. Mm. And so if they can kind of rationally know why this is not a potentially stupid thing to do, it's a little more reassurance toward purchasing it. I love it. And that was so interesting what you were telling me earlier about benefits, but you got to go beyond what we think of as benefits. Yeah, I think most people tend, especially more beginner copywriters, they tend to just pile on benefits. And they think, well, if I just get enough benefits and it's just like heavy enough and weighs enough, it'll outweigh all their skepticism and everything else. And the reality is that you get to a certain point where it's just not believable to say how you can make $1 million, you can cure your disease overnight, or, whatever it is. Even if you make very slight benefits, even if you can only make $10,000, if you can make that as powerful to them as possible and as real as possible and as believable as possible, then you can sell them. It doesn't have to be $1 million. There's a couple ways to do that. One way is, you bring in the emotional component of the benefit. So it's not just, $10,000, but now it's like, what does that $10,000 mean emotionally to you in terms of taking care of your family, in terms of not being berated by your brother-in-law at the Thanksgiving dinner table about all the money he's making, making you feel a certain way. Right. Seeing those, dramatizing those benefits, like imagine a guy showing up at your door with a check for $10,000. Like, how great would that be? Or, those kinds. How great would it be to not need somebody to show up at your door with a check? And how great would it be not to always be thinking about that? Right. Mm-hmm. So adding drama to it a lot of times. That's why sometimes we'll translate $10,000 into something dramatic, like a $10,000 car or something, vacation to Paris. Right. Something more visceral, tangible that you can wrap your head around. Yeah, exactly. Or something that you've had to go without. Mm-hmm. It's always the powerful thing with the kids, right? Having to say no to your kids all the time. Right. Finally take them to Disney World. Yeah, that's a nice emotional kind of pulling to it. Yeah. I was just going to say, I think the third part of that too is the implications of benefits. Like what is, there's a thing where you keep saying, and that means, right? So you get $10,000, and that means you'll be able to afford the things that you want, blah, blah, blah. And that means that you won't feel like a schlub anymore because you can't afford all these things. And that means you'll become the person you've always wanted to be, and you'll have this great confidence as you go through life, which will attract you even more money. And that means you'll just be ultimately happy and fulfilled and, all the things that, that's kind of like I got to the end. But you get to the end by saying, and that means, and that means, and that means, and it's just a whole different, it's so different than just like we started by saying, piling on, benefits. And does that come from the research more than anything? We think about understanding the avatar. How do we know if our that means is matching what they want? Yeah, that's great. I think it comes from understanding the avatar and understanding the person. Sometimes it just comes from putting yourself in the shoes of the person. It's like, okay, if I were this person that didn't, let's say I didn't have $10,000. Let's say that was a lot of money to me, or that was like I was living paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. What would $10,000 mean? If I can envision that, I don't need to go interview them. I don't need to do research. Like, I know what that means, right? Because I can see, oh God, that means I can't just go eat dinner anywhere I want. Right. That,
Ted Kikola used to just sort of lock himself in a room and close his eyes and think about being, putting himself into the mind of the prospect.
Right. So you don't have to have literally walked in those shoes, but you have to have empathy to think about and feel what it would be like to wear those shoes.
Some of it is you could see for yourself. And then some of it is when you talk to people, there's always those things you're like, wow, I never realized that when someone is overweight, they're embarrassed all the time. I never realized that when someone is poor, they're embarrassed by being poor. I never realized that when someone is poor, that their biggest fear is there's going to be some bill that's going to come and throw them into bankruptcy.
Right.
And maybe they'll get thrown in jail for not paying their bills. I don't, whatever that is. That never would have occurred to me. That's the sort of thing it's great to get, directly from people.
I always think about when I first moved back to Florida, it was between careers. I was broke.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister-in-law used to fill her car with gas, and she'd lock it and let it fill. And I'd be going, wow, what's that like? Because I had to think about how much gas I could afford to put in my car.
Right.
It'd be $10 or maybe I can go 12 today. I'm feeling all right. I'm liquid. And so now when I fill every time I click that thing, it's anchored there. I remember what it's like to not be able to click the gas pump.
Those little things are so powerful. And they're also powerful because if you bring them up in the copy, like if you say in kind of copy, like, I know what it's like to feel like, do you stop the gas from filling at $10 or $20 because you can't afford more than that? They go, boy, that person knows me.
Right.
I could do business with this person. I want this person to help me. It's the same thing when you talk about having arthritis. I think this is an example Paris uses a lot. You have arthritis. Very few people know that that don't have arthritis know that, like, it hurts to open a jar. And so you're like, oh God, I got to open a jar. This is going to hurt. I got to turn this doorknob. It's going to hurt. And if you write to them about that, you just mention that in passing. Yeah. There's a bond there that's amazing.
I remember our friend Marcel Allison writing about incontinence and going to the adult diaper aisle and chatting up the women shopping for those products because she has that kind of personality.
Right.
And one of the things she learned was it was not only complicated to find the right pair, but then the checkout was quite embarrassing. And so they'd buy other stuff.
Right. That's such precious knowledge. When you know your prospect to that level, you have we think copywriting is about writing, and it's not to a large extent. Mm-hmm. It's that, what makes someone like John a great copywriter is great psychological insight and looking for those great psychological insights. And it's like that, knowing that embarrassment.
Proof seems simple, but people screw up using proof in sales copy.
Yeah, I think they do in a way. I mean, proof is great, right? You want to have proof. It's like a really important element. But proof alone isn't enough to get someone to buy, right? We don't buy from the salesperson that proves that this is a great car or whatever. We buy from the salesperson we trust and we like because there's so many other things that can go wrong. So I think it's great to have proof, but you also need to engender trust. And I think that's where people fall down a lot of times when they're so busy concentrating on proof. It's like, how do you build that trust, right? What are the elements that go into that? I think there's a couple of things. I think a big part of trust is that you feel like that person has your interests at heart. You feel, and of course we do that as copywriters. We can do that by giving them good information. Yeah. By admitting, what do you call that when it's like admitting an error, a flaw?
Yeah,
where you have
embarrassing omission or
kind of the old example. I think it's Ogilvy's example of the guy that's selling antiques, and he's trying to sell you this chair, and then he turns it over and says, if you notice on the bottom of this chair, there's a scratch underneath the seat. Right. It's like, who cares? But the fact that he showed me that makes me trust him a little more.
Yeah, Sugarman would talk about leading with that sometimes. Remember the thermostat? Yep. It's the ugliest thermostat you've ever seen, but it's amazing. It works so good.
Yeah. And I think the other element, too, is just how much you like the person. How much you find the person interesting. You want to be with this person. And also how much you feel the person likes you. A lot of writing is kind of, it's great that you're here reading this. It shows that you're the kind of person, whatever. You've already gotten to this point in life and you wouldn't be here without being a certain kind of person. And I'm like, it's like they're proud of you.
Yeah. It's like, it's a one-sided conversation, but when done right, you're creating a need in the reader to be accepted. For this to go well, this relationship we're starting together needs to go well.
Yes. And also that I want this relationship to continue because this person makes me feel a certain way about myself. So buying his program, buying his product, getting into his coaching, whatever it is, it will continue to make me feel good about myself. Dan Kennedy uses that a lot. That kind of, he's like a cheerleader he's a very stern taskmaster, but he's also a cheerleader for the reader of you're different than most people. You stand out. You're a businessman. You've worked hard. You sacrificed a lot. He's always trying to get people to understand that. And I think that's just so incredibly powerful.
It's sort of qualifying in real time. You're describing ways that you believe they are. And if they agree, they're receiving the message that I am qualified to be having this conversation. And therefore I'll be qualified to make this purchase when it's offered to me.
Right. It's kind of like that thing of you divide people into the smart people and the stupid people. And if I don't buy your product, I'm in the stupid people category. And if I do, I'm in the smart people category. So there's even more incentive to not be that loser guy that doesn't take advantage of opportunity or whatever it is.
When you sit down to think about writing that first draft, how deep into that conversation do you feel like you've figured out in your head before you start writing?
I think a lot of it I've already figured out in my head because I like to talk to people about things that I'm working on and products and kind of almost like try to sell people on what I'm trying to do because then I see, this is where they get bored. This is where they're interested. These are the questions they ask. This is the resistance that I find. I think a lot of it I do kind of automatically now in my head, kind of as I'm writing and especially as I'm rewriting. I need to put these kinds of elements in there.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great test, right? It's like Carlton always talks about how Halbert would loop on ideas and sort of torture people in his inner circle because he was looking for that. He needed to hear the idea over and over to see if this is valid or when do they perk up or when do they get past that's really interesting, Gary, how does that work? Or, where do I get one of those?
Yes. When you get to where do I get one of those, that's then Then he goes and writes the copy, right? That's the time to write the copy.
So the proof needs to be baked in more than just a testimonial, more than just a happy person with a quote. Yeah. It's really, the proof can only be as effective as the level of trust you've built and rapport you've built with the prospect.
Yeah. And I like to call it believability. I think you have believability that you need to get. Just as you have promise you need to give, you need to have believability. It's kind of like two axes on a graph. And to get that believability up, you need proof, right? But you also need trust because I'm not going to believe you until I trust you and you've given me the proof that I need to go ahead with this. So if you're always looking at those two elements, you'll be fine.
Can you quantify this advice you'd give to somebody about how to write proof into the copy?
I would say when you're thinking about proof, do all you can to give a kind of a scientific proof, right? This is an article. This is a study. This is a really factual basis, right? So you want that kind of proof. You want credentializing proof. It was in the Wall Street Journal. This person said this. These people said this. Testimonials. It all gives it a kind of a proof by association, which isn't really scientific, factual proof, right? Then there's common sense proof. It's like I say to you, Kevin, you really should do this because it's like when you ride a motorcycle, you need a helmet. When you're doing this thing, you need this product. And so that's a kind of a proof, that kind of analogy, that kind of, doesn't it make sense that if you're going to write copy, you have a copywriting course that shows you how to do it easily and quickly and gives you templates to fill out and everything like that? Mm. So that makes sense. That's a kind of proof. So at the same time, you want to do that, but then you also want to think about trust. Am I being in this letter a person that people want to buy from? Will they like me? Will they trust me? Will they want to buy from me? And then you're golden when you have those two things.
Awesome. I appreciate you being here.
Oh, I really enjoyed it.
Where do people find more about David Deutsch? They need to be on your list.
They do need to be on my list, and they can get on it and get some free stuff too at davidldeutsch.com. That's DavidLDeutsch.com.
All right. Thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Copy Chief Radio. Copy Chief Radio.